ever had any doubts about that theme, they dissipated when someone once compared it to sitting with your girlfriend on a couch and, over a bottle of wine and just turning the lights down low. And at that point, I decided, you know what? I'm going to keep this theme forever for as long as I can. Welcome to this pre-recorded episode of the Mike the New Haven podcast. This is in the middle of a bunch of FDNY interviews that we've been doing. At the time that you're hearing this, I just got done interviewing a former FDNY Chief of Department, John Sudnick, on Monday for what was the 69th volume of the Best and the Bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. And by the time you hear this, I'll have interviewed Mark Peck for volume 70, who served as a paramedic in the FDNY EMS division. So this guest we go back to our journalistic roots here at the Mike the New Haven podcast, who I'll introduce momentarily. As I was just telling her off the air, I first heard her on our friends over at Gold Shields with Tom Smith and Dan Murphy. And I knew I had to have her on the show because she's covered a lot. She's done a lot. And we'll talk about it over the hour that we have with her. So won't keep her waiting long. But as always, just got to quickly run an ad for our man, retired NYPD detective and private investigator, Bill Ryan. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike the New Haven podcast. Okay, my next guest is a journalist, on-air personality, and podcaster who's built a unique voice in entertainment reporting, unfiltered, direct, and sharp. Whether she's on the red carpet interviewing A-list talent or diving into the details of a high-profile criminal case, she brings a refreshing honesty that cuts through the noise. She's covered premieres, film festivals, and true crime stories, while also making time for real conversations that go beyond the glamour. And that here on this pre-recorded edition of the Mike the New Haven podcast is reporter and podcaster Lauren Conlin. Lauren, welcome. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much. That was such a nice intro.
Oh, you're quite welcome. So before we dive into everything involving your career, just take me through where you grew up and did you get bit by the journalist bug early on?
Yes, I grew up in New Hampshire, a small town outside of Manchester, actually. And it's funny, I did get bit by this reporter bug actually in 5th grade. I was recently home at my parents' house and I found this letter from one of my teachers that they were, inviting me and asking my parents if I could be part of this 5th grade reporting club. But what's funny is that I was also very much into musical theater. So I had to actually defer this reporter gig in 5th grade until I was finished with this one musical. And, that seemed to be the sort of push-pull for the first X many years of my life. I ended up going the route of theater into college, and I minored in journalism and communications. And then after college, I kind of was a little bit wishy-washy and sort of came back to my journalistic roots pretty late, actually. I would say, I don't want to give my age away, but yes, I would say I came back to my journalistic roots after I had my children.
Well, it's never too late. And you ended up kind of marrying the two, as we'll talk about. Our guest is Lauren Conlin here in the Mike the New Haven podcast. I was going to say, you went to Marist for communications and media studies. Marymount, rather, not Marist. Yeah. I apologize. Was it That's NYU for arts and entertainment, I believe? NYU, or was it elsewhere?
What's that?
Where did you go for arts and entertainment specifically?
No, I went to Marymount. That was my undergrad. So Marymount, right in Manhattan. I started with the musical theater major, and then I was like, oh, I don't know about this, and I had a minor in communications and journalism, and I did the whole kind of fib on your resume, sort of swap the two, and it worked. I did a couple internships at CBS and at Fox 5 actually, and I also realized that doing theater in New York, you're very much a small fish in this big pond, and it was the opposite in New Hampshire. So, I actually, and this is so random, I ended up kind of working in marketing after college, after Fox and CBS, when I was like, no to theater, and also I wasn't ready, I guess, in my 20s to have this horrible news schedule. At Fox, they all had offered me this position where it was like, I think it was like 4 in the morning to, maybe noon or some shift like that. And it was so bad. It was like no money. And I was like, oh man, I don't think I want to do this. So I kind of was like, let me just get a marketing job that I kind of saw, off some job website for the time being. And I did that for a while again until I had my children. And then I was like, no, I am going back to reporting. I started podcasting, and I guess it's all been wonderful from there. So I can't imagine doing anything else besides what I'm doing now. But also I feel like, God has a plan for everyone. I know that sounds cliche.
Oh no, I believe in that. So
Yeah.
listen,
And
I'm the
so
same way.
maybe, there's a reason that I did start reporting and podcasting sort of later in life.
I don't know. And listen, like I said, never too late. But I want to go back to that for a second, because once you have kids, it's funny. I don't have children of my own, but everyone that I know, all my friends that do, tell me that your perspective changes because there's something greater than you, and you feel so responsible, especially as a mom, I imagine. And my
Yeah.
mom mentions that all the time as well. So, but then again, it is tough wearing both hats, first as a mother and then going back to try to change careers and get into something that you really love. So I imagine you had a great support system, and you still do. But nevertheless, I'll ask you, how did you juggle it, especially since, kids change everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a juggle, but I think at that point, I had my kids, and going into an office full time, for marketing, I knew that wasn't my passion anyway, and I did want some flexibility. So, my brother, he had been working at New York One, I think it was, or maybe it was Broadway.com, one of the two. But he had this relationship with George Whipple from New York One, with the big bushy eyebrows. And
Yeah.
so George needed like basically a red carpet producer, because New York One wasn't providing him with one at the time. So he was going to pay out of pocket for one. And my brother was like, oh, Lauren, you should do it because you do have a background in this somewhat. You're passionate about it, and you wanted the flexibility of still being with your kids and, whatever. So I started doing that with George, and it was easy at first because I did have this flexibility of, only kind of working at night or afternoon. So that was nice. And then as my kids, got older and I was doing that for about a year, I realized that I wanted to do more than just sort of produce for George and sort of be, after a while, he would just kind of do the stand-ups and hand me the microphone, and I was doing the red carpet interviews, and they would sort of edit it to make it, like George did it. And which is very normal. A lot of producers do that on the red carpet, but I wanted more. So I decided to start my own entertainment podcast and continue to do the red carpet stuff as well for George and then for myself. And it was great because, again, it was more flexibility than I had ever had. And so I did, I had my kids that I could focus on. And then I also had this outlet in my passion. But, slowly, and you mentioned now, I really do focus more so on criminal cases and trials, and a lot of them involving celebrities. But
Right.
that I sort of pivoted because, you get to a point, I guess, on the red carpet, and I didn't know I was going to get to this point, but also just covering entertainment and films and celebrities. I mean, it gets boring, and it gets to be this sort of like, it's just a lot of butt kissing, excuse me, after a while. And it's just that wasn't me. I felt guilty talking to an actor about this movie I didn't like. And I was, I would say, oh yeah, I liked it fine. And it was not, I wasn't being honest with myself or with them. And I had always had this interest in crime and criminal cases. And so I just kind of got to work on that as well. And I sort of have pivoted since then. And I really enjoy it.
As we'll cover momentarily, because I was going to ask,
Yeah.
again, I see so many, and there's some entertainment reporters who I know, and I'm not putting them down in any way, but I'd be lying if I didn't wonder when I see them
Yeah.
post a highlight clip of their interview with some A-lister. Did you really love that project? There's no way you can love every project you're possibly seeing. Some of them have got to be pure dog crap. So,
Yeah.
again, putting on that facade, it's not easy. And plus, here's the other layer to it, too. And again, I'm not knocking entertainment reporters at all. it's very hard to stand out on the red carpet. These celebrities have been there, done that. And what question can you ask them they haven't already answered some variation of thousands of times over?
Well, it's not, I mean, yes, but it's not just that. It's also, I mean, you can be invited on a red carpet. And I always, if I did New York one with George, I would get a better spot, right? I'd sort of either be in the middle or towards the front. And then when I sort of did my own podcast and I was building my own brand, I used my relationships to get on the carpet. But then it's a whole different ball game because every celebrity is with their PR person, and I mean, they're looking down at who you're with, and if they've never heard of your outlet, they're kind of like, why should we talk to you?
Right.
I mean, at this point, I personally think that times have changed, and I haven't done a red carpet in a while, but I think that somebody who maybe follows me on TikTok or my YouTube, I think I could get their movie or their celebrity more exposure than like CBS 2, because I don't think as many people watch anymore. But the challenge was trying to get them to pay attention to you, stop so you could ask them a couple questions and get your money shot right there. And I'm super aggressive. I have zero shame. I will say I've
Same.
chased people. Yeah, I don't give it a crap, whatever. I know, Mike, you warned me not to swear. I'm like, I can do it. And now I'm like, potty mouth, sorry. But yeah, I don't care. I was always pretty good about, running to get whoever. And was it embarrassing at times? Definitely. And did I kind of get snapped at sometimes? Oh yeah. But it is what it is, and you have to try. If you don't try, then you won't know.
Yeah. So tell me about Shrek 3, this, and
Yeah,
I
I
say
mean,
this.
so yeah, I think the last red carpet I did, it was probably a few months ago, right before the Diddy trial. And I remember I didn't even care about the movie. I went so I could get sound bites from some of these people. I think it was like Gordon Hayward. I think he plays in the NBA. I don't know.
Yeah, he's on the Charlotte Hornets, I
Okay,
think.
thank you. Yeah, so I don't know sports. I don't know anything about him. And I was like, I'm like, have you ever been to a Diddy party? And then the person next to me was like, he's Mormon. That was a horrible question. I was like, shut up. I don't, whatever. Like, I was like, I'm just trying to get sound bites here. So, yeah, that's what you got to do. You got to know what you're there for at this point. And I still promoted the movie. I was, I'll do them a solid. I won't
Right.
just, I won't be a jerk.
Shout out to Gordon Hayward, who used to torture my Knicks when he was on the Celtics regularly. So I'm very happy he's not on the Celtics anymore.
There you go.
Yeah, diehard sports fan here in the Mike Demaven podcast. Our guest for this pre-recorded episode is Lauren Conlin. I'm recording this on Wednesday, August 6th. You're going to hear this Wednesday, August 13th, the week to follow. So I guess we'll just jump right into it because you mentioned it was your passion. And diving into some of these trials, I mean, you mentioned Diddy, so we'll start there. These allegations and really his troubles go all the way back to the early 90s. He always, for the record, for those of you who don't know, his nickname Puffy came from childhood because he would get so angry, evidently, his face would puff up, and hence the name Puff Daddy, or Puffy as he was originally known. 1991, he illegally puts a concert together. A stampede happens. Multiple people are killed in that. And that just started a cycle. That's what we do know about with him, leading to everything today. But I never thought, because unfortunately people in Hollywood, at least up until recently, seem to get away with everything, they would come to the light like that. So being at the forefront of covering that, especially after all these disgusting allegations of abuse and so much more coming out, what was it like? And just tell me about trying to dig up information on a guy that it's kind of an open secret for years, unfortunately. He's a monster.
Well, I don't know if you're going to be expecting the answer I'm about to give you, but I think that what happened before his criminal federal trial here is the media really tainted the court of public opinion with these wild civil suits. Lil Rod Jones, I mean, really, Cassie's civil suit is one thing, but which really also kicked off the investigation into Sean Combs as well as Lil Rod Jones. But I mean, civil suits, you can accuse anybody of anything. You can write whatever you want in those, and it's not going to be proven either way until it gets into a courtroom. And these civil suits are public, so we can read all of these allegations, we can believe them, we can spread all of the facts of these lawsuits as we please. And I think that's what happened. So going into the Diddy trial, I think many of us were expecting to hear about minors, to hear about drugs and the baby oil. Like, what is the point of this baby oil that we're hearing so much about? And there was rumors, there was GHB in the baby oil. And we thought that Diddy was gay and we were going to hear more about that. It just wasn't like that. So what we heard inside that courtroom, it was not a racketeering trial, in my opinion. And clearly, the jury didn't see it that way. With the sex trafficking, I mean, that is tough. I personally didn't see how Jane Doe was sex trafficked. I truly didn't. I think Cassie could have gone either way. But the evidence that was presented to the jury really showed that he was in a relationship with these two women. And he thought these hotel nights, these FOs, I mean, he thought this was something that he was doing with his significant other. I don't personally think that he had this mens rea, the guilty mind, that he was forcing them or coercing them. And at certain points in the trial, his lawyers would say, Your Honor, I just don't think promised quality time counts as fraud or coercion here. Like he would say to Jane Doe, we'll do this hotel night and then I'll take you to this island off the coast of Miami. They would never go. And the government was using that as, force or coercion or fraud. And it was kind of interesting because they would just say, this is regular couples drama. I think the whole thing was that we saw this horrific video of him beating Cassie in 2016. That right there is aggravated assault. You could also consider, obviously the hotel bribe as a bribery charge at a state level. I think that if that had gone to trial in 2016, 2017, within the statute of limitations, he would have been found guilty and we wouldn't be here. But I had a really hard time with what I was hearing sometimes during the trial. I was shocked at some of these witnesses for the government, the assistants, even the male assistants, who would just kind of be like, Diddy was mean to me. He yelled at me. He looked over my shoulder when I was, and I'm like, what, why are you here? Like, and they would even kind of give him a head nod. Like they still respected him. They would talk about how much they learned from him. It was just bizarre. I was just like, of all the people, and I know that I think it was like 2006 to 2024 or something like that, or the present. So they couldn't go too far back, but I was confused by some of it. But with that being said, I'm not sitting here saying that he's a good guy or anything like that. Or
no, not at all.
Nothing like that. I'm just saying, I just didn't think the trial was going to be that, I guess.
No, fair point, because my whole thought process with it is funny. When the verdict came down, I work as a media guy for one of the fire departments here in Connecticut, and me and my lieutenant saw it come across the street on Fox. And the first thing one of my lieutenants said was, do you think he was overcharged? And there were some things where, sometimes I go back to the OJ trial. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit. It was kind of the same thing here where, don't get me wrong, there were some troubling things in there. The video of him assaulting Cassie being one of them. But I think the district attorney's office might have overshot, and had they just charged for what it was as opposed
U.S.
to what they
Attorney's
thought it could have
Office.
been.
Yeah. I mean, well, Damian Williams, he was the one, that first announced this case and how they were prosecuting it. And then Maureen Comey took over the case. And Maureen Comey actually was the one that added the 2 Mann Act violation charges. I think it was 2 or 3 months before this went to trial. And those were the 2 convictions. Those were the only convictions that they got. And so I think that was smart of her, I guess. And that's probably because she was looking through all the evidence, through Cassie's laptop, all this stuff. And those charges right there, I think those were the ones that were the most tangible, where you saw phone records, airline records, correspondences between the quote unquote escorts and Diddy, Cassie, Jane Doe. I think those, that Maureen Comey saw that and she was like, oh yeah, this is like a sure thing right here. So she was the one that added those charges last minute. And, I guess she did the best she could with what she had. But if I were her, I don't know. I maybe would have made some adjustments to that case. But yeah. And you know what? I think that the U.S. Attorney's Office feels the same way, or the Southern District, because obviously she's no longer in her position there.
Yeah, no, kind of ruined, at least for the time being, ruined her career. Kind of makes her, again, a different trial, different circumstances, but it makes her this era's Marsha Clark to a degree. For a lot of the, yeah, which is not a title that you want, but nevertheless, unfortunately, for different reasons, kind of happened in her case. So, nevertheless, I'll go back to just kind of merging the two, especially as the curtain gets lifted and a lot of the absurdities of Hollywood these days. You mentioned it was always a passion of yours. And of course, you've channeled that passion to what you're doing now. Hearing some of this stuff in court, though, it can be disturbing, because again, it's just the ugliness of human nature. And I always like asking reporters that cover your type of stories is how do you just put that channel up to protect your own psyche? Because at the end of the day, it is a job, but you're human. You're hearing some pretty awful stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely hard. I think I was very exhausted during the Diddy trial, but for other reasons, I mean that trial, yes, we did have to see the video a lot, the beatdown video, which for me it never got easier. And I would look at the jury and I'm like, man, they don't seem phased by it anymore. But I still just had such a hard time watching it. But I think with that trial, it was just we had to hear and read so many explicit sexual text messages between Diddy and his partners that it was just too much. I was just so uncomfortable and I was like, this needs to end. And I'm not even a prude. I can handle it. I swear. I normally don't care. But this was just on another level, Mike. I just hope I never have to see that again. But there is one case out of Kansas and Oklahoma, and I was contracting or I was doing some work for a company back in December when this one pretrial hearing was happening in Kansas, or I'm sorry, it was Oklahoma, but the mothers that were murdered, it was a double murder. They were from
Yep.
Kansas. It's known as the Kansas Moms case. But that one took it out of me. I went to the pretrial hearing by myself, and I did have to drive every day from Kansas to Oklahoma. It was just such a rural area that was very quiet. And these two mothers were essentially murdered by 5 defendants who called themselves God's misfits. And it's a terrifying story, a terrifying case that still, they just set a trial date actually for next June. But essentially, during a pretrial hearing, the judge has to ensure that there is enough evidence, enough, just basically that this case is good enough to go to trial. And so they gave one of the defendants who admitted to being the one that killed one of the women, we're cutting him a deal. They were saying, death is off the table if you testify as to what happened. And I was in the courtroom and, as press, you're really supposed to be stone-faced, just take your notes, look down, do your thing. But I found myself, my eyes were watering. When he was talking, I was not okay. And the families are behind me and they were gasping, they were screaming. I'm telling you, I was like, okay, I don't know what to do right now. And then I had to go back to this this Best Western in the middle of nowhere, Kansas by myself after hearing that. And that's when I was like, okay, I don't know what to do right now. So that was tough. I will say that was one of the hardest things to cover. And I don't know how I got through it. I think it was just a lot of prayer. It was a lot of stupid TikTok videos that were dumb, like just doom scrolling, brain rot videos that sort of helped get my mind off of it. But I didn't sleep a wink and my body was all out of whack. This is TMI, but I got like 2 periods that month. Okay. I was like, this is not normal. This is so messed up. So luckily I haven't, sorry, your listeners are probably like, shut up. We don't need to hear that. But
No,
I said it anyway, because that's what happens. It does affect you sometimes. But yeah, I haven't experienced anything like that in a long time, obviously since December, thank goodness. But gosh,
good.
and if that was me who really didn't have any connections to that case, I can't imagine the families, and it was, yeah, it's awful.
So my listeners know my background. They know I grew up as the only boy in a household full of women, which is a running joke on this program. So you saying that is without even know
Great.
yeah,
Okay.
it's par for the course. If there's ever a guy that understands, it's this guy right here.
Perfect.
So
That makes
you're
me
fine.
feel better.
Yeah, you're fine. We're talking with Lauren Conlin here in the Mike the New Haven podcast of Pop Crime TV. She's covered many high-profile criminal cases, mostly involving celebrities, although that one did not. But back to your career for a second before we continue with these cases, because it's a career worth chronicling, of course. You're everywhere on social media. You know, you've been able to really make a name for yourself, which is something that I've been trying to do here. We've done well for ourselves, but I look at you, and I was talking about this with Tom Smith the other day. I'm like, I mentioned I wanted to get to his level. I want to get to your level too. Being able to network, being able to establish these connections is not easy, even if you've been someone like yourself who has been in the business a relatively long time. But you're able to make these appearances on these outlets. You're able to gain such a good following on social media, covering a topic that a lot of people do, but you stand out. So, what helps you stand out, and what's been the key in establishing these very valuable connections to get your name out there?
Oh, I mean, it's so nice to hear you say that because I don't think anybody ever feels, I know myself, I don't feel like I am where I want to be at all. So I appreciate you saying that. So just know that it never gets better. You always want more. You always feel like you're not doing enough or you're not good enough. Or so I do appreciate you saying that. But for me, I think it just goes kind of back to what I said on the red carpet. You have to try. And there's been so many times where I've said, like, okay, if I reach out to this person, is this going to sound desperate? Or am I going to, and I'm like, you know what, whatever, just do it. And I usually end up, reaching out. I do. I think that it probably was maybe during the pandemic that I was just sending so many emails. I was just finding anyone and everyone to sort of reach out to say, hey, I'm available to talk about XYZ. This is my podcast. This is what I do, because I wanted to be everywhere. I wanted to tap into other people's audiences. So I would just Google, I would guess emails, I would, send them out. And I mean, to a degree, I guess I don't know if I necessarily do as much outreach. I guess I take that back. It's more about like finding the story, I think, finding what people want to hear about when it comes to that story. And also, how do you help the person that could possibly be involved in that story and not seem like you're trying to capitalize off somebody's grief or somebody's misfortune. I think all of that comes into play. You have to be aggressive but sensitive. You have to know the market. You have to know your audience, different audiences, and you have to bring something special. I think you have to bring something different, and whether or not that's knowledge, I guess, or just sort of like a different take or a different personality. I mean, I think that is just sort of, what it is. I don't think there's any exact recipe, I guess, but I do think that you have to try and you have to be yourself. And I think that people can see when someone is being genuine and honest, or when they don't really care. And I hope that people can see that I actually do care. I actually, you know what I mean? Like, I will choose not to cover certain things, even though I understand how quote unquote clickable that could be, just because it feels icky. So I think it's like, yeah, it's kind of just a mix of everything.
I think the media landscape has changed so much now where there's a niche for everybody, which is nice. Like, for example,
Yeah.
as we've talked about off air with this program, everybody has a podcast these days. This program in particular, although we do sports interviews on occasion and media interviews like today, it's primarily a first responder show. So, okay, so how can we make this a niche for first responders to come on and tell their stories? And it's being able, I guess, and it's funny because I also have a consulting company where I help people with this very thing, where people ask me, well, what's behind a podcast? I want to start one. I'm like, you have to make it a reflection of you. What are your interests? What do you like? It's evident in our conversation thus far, the half hour's flown by, that you love what you do, even with all the frustrations it can come with, like any job, or any pressures it can come with, like any job. You love talking about it. You've litten up, or you've litten up. Yeah,
No,
we'll go with that.
yeah, that's a weird one.
Yeah.
Lit up. Yeah.
Yeah, light up when we've talked about it so
Yeah.
far. So it's the same thing. I think if you could find what you're passionate about and try to channel it, there's a pathway. There's definitely a pathway, and you've definitely found your pathway.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, one day I actually really hope that I can sort of write a book about everything.
Mhm.
I'm really interested and I don't know if anyone else would be interested, but I've always thought about just writing a faith slash crime book. And I know that sounds weird. I guess I'm kind of saying it out loud for the first time here, really, but I think as someone that's a Christian, I go to church and I pray a lot and I just, I try to live my life as a good person. I think it's tough to not sort of question God in some of these cases. So I know that the Kansas mom's case, I would just pray and pray. And I'm just like, why would this happen? What is the point of this? And I think it would just be very interesting to explore in a book, tapping into some experts, just people that study theology, people that who have no connection to the crime world that possibly have insight. Also, family members, how they cope, and how family members of loved ones who've been slain, if they are Christian, how do you cope? How do you go back to God? How do you keep your faith throughout all of this? So that's also something that I kind of want to explore one day.
Oh yeah, you listen, and the more you tap into it, I think the better it is. Because again, as we go back or I go back rather to what I mentioned earlier, it's all in how you channel it. Writing for me is very cathartic and therapeutic for the exact same reason. You can kind of get everything out that you're feeling. Then
Yeah.
listen, I think a lot of people would definitely read a project like that. So just moving ahead to a couple other trials, again, kind of with the same theme. I'll get to Koberger in a second because you talked about that one at length as well, and that one just wrapped up.
Mm.
The Epstein saga, and it's nothing that's going to be solved here on this forum or any other forum for quite a while. It's still ongoing. There's a lot we know, but I think what's captivating the public right now, besides the major implications of who's involved and so on and so forth, is what we don't know. And it's still a sprawling, unraveling mystery. There's the issue about the files. Are they going to be public? Are they not going to be public? You had a hand in covering that a little bit. And unfortunately, the individual at the center of this is dead. How he died is also a mystery in and of itself. So, I think I consider myself to a degree to be a reporter as well. I think the frustrating thing is when you don't have the answer, right? It's kind of at the core of journalism, finding the answer, and there's not a lot of answers here. So just tell me about this case and what you've learned so far and what captivates you about it.
Well, I think at this point, I don't want to say I'm done, but I don't. And look, I voted for Trump. Okay, I I just don't anything they say about this case right now. I don't believe them. I don't care. I think that somebody already destroyed probably the most important files already when they said, "Oh, there's nothing to see here. There's no evidence of a list of blackmail. Yeah, he didn't. He wasn't murdered. He killed." I'm just like, okay. After that whole thing, and after Bondi's horrific phase 1 failure, I mean, I'm done. I'm truly done. I don't believe them. I think that Trump's gaslighting is just beyond at this point. And yeah, like when he answers questions, like you're still asking about this when there's so much going on and this and that. Yes, I understand what he's saying. You're right, but you guys brought it up. This administration sat there after I mean, how many young people felt lied to, right, during COVID by the Biden administration when their schools were shut down, this and that, and they wanted the Trump administration to come in and stop the lying. They want transparency. We want transparency, right? And I feel like it. They came in here and said, "Oh, there's no more deep state because there's not going to be any more secrets." Well, yeah, that's not true. You guys right now are the deep state. The fact that you are deflecting beyond belief at this point. Now we're on to Ghislaine, and now we're doing these subpoenas. Whatever. Oh, I think this morning I saw a headline. Oh, the DOJ confirms that Trump is not in the. It's like, okay, sure. Like, how do you expect us to believe this now? And look, I don't necessarily think Trump was, involved with minors and this and that. But yeah, he was friendly with Epstein, as was half of the world. I mean, you look at some of these civil suits, and you look at the U.S. Virgin Islands, their investigation into Epstein. I mean, he was unequivocally connected to some of the most powerful people in the world. That's just a fact. So, however they want to spin this, that's fine. I don't believe you guys. I'm done. You had Kash Patel, Dan Bongino coming out saying, "Yep, we support this. He didn't commit suicide, blah, blah, blah." And then, like, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Dan Bongino's like, "I don't know what's going on. I don't believe it." And I'm just like, well, make up your mind, guys. Make up your mind. So I'm so sick of it, Mike. I'm just like, it's offensive to me at this point. It's so offensive. And I've interviewed Ghislaine's appellate lawyer, Arthur Aidala. I just had Rudy Giuliani on my live stream where I'm asking him about Trump and
Saw that.
Epstein. And he's saying, like, I mean, they were kind of friendly, but then Trump kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago, like actually had his picture on the wall saying, "Don't let this guy in here because he's talking to my masseuses after the massages." And they were of age, but he was just trying to get them to do sexual favors for him. And look, Ghislaine, I mean, from what I have heard from very credible sources connected to her, she is a horrible human being. Does she hold the key? Yeah, she holds the key here. Should she get a pardon? No. But should other people be locked up? Heck yes. Sorry. So yeah, I'm just like, God, you had to get me started on that. I get so angry because at this point, I don't believe anything they're saying. And I don't care. I don't care. If they want to protect everybody, then go ahead and protect whoever you're protecting. But I don't believe you guys anymore.
I always go back to this line, and viewers have heard me quote it before. One of my favorite bands is Jane's Addiction. They have a song called Ted Just Admitted about Ted Bundy, came out in their first album. And the opening line that I always go back to of that song is, "Cameras got them images, cameras got them all, nothing shocking." And the reason why that line sticks with me is I think that's the attitude of most people these days. They're so desensitized to it because they've heard about it, and it's everywhere. Like we talked about social media, TikTok, Instagram, everybody's got an opinion on it, different podcasts as well. That people just kind of have emotionally, they'll stay attached to it for a little bit. Most of the public has moved on. I'm not saying it's right, but they have, because the next big scandal, the next big story is seemingly always around the corner. And I guess that's kind of the mentality here of most of society, unfortunately.
Sure. But I mean, and I don't know if pinning this on the Clintons is the smartest thing to do because, yeah, I think they're heavily involved or they were heavily involved with Epstein. But I think other people were as well. So I don't know. I just go back to like, I just don't believe them anymore. So anything out of their mouth right now, I'm kind of like, why should I believe you now? You guys are now you know what I mean? Like you
no, I got you.
said this and yeah, it's just stupid.
Last thing on that, before we move on to other things that you've covered, most notably Koberger recently, there is the theory, Tom and Dan just had on a guest who was a former CIA analyst, and there was a theory that somehow Mr. Epstein may have been connected as some sort of a spy agent for either the Mossad or the CIA, and we don't know. And again, this is not a conspiracy podcast at all, but what stock do you put into that, if anything, as a reporter?
I don't know. I mean, we know Ghislaine's father was Mossad. We know that Epstein seemingly became a billionaire overnight. Yeah, for no reason when he was formerly a teacher. But is that connected to, to Israel? I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I don't have any evidence around that claim, except for the fact that it's just, let's add it to the list of just oddities about this guy. Yeah. So I think at this point, anything is possible. I don't put anything past Epstein, past Ghislaine. I mean, did you see Les Wexner? I think he just bought Obama's house in Martha's Vineyard. I'm pretty sure I just saw that headline and I was just thinking, chef not included. Just kidding. Horrible. But yeah, so, it's kind of just like, I don't know. I don't put anything past anyone when it comes to that orbit, but it's like, I just don't have the proof to be like, yes, I believe it,
Right. And for those of you listening to this or will listen to this later, as you know, we're not conspiratorial here. We just like to go over the aspects of these cases because they are in the public eye when we have crime reporters on. So that's all. I'm not suggesting anything either. I have to put this disclaimer out there, either way or the other. Simply just asking out of genuine curiosity because most people are curious about these sort of things. Koberger was heartbreaking, not for him, obviously, but just because these victims truly, again, they talk about being as defenseless as you could possibly be. They were sleeping. They were sleeping. And I don't know, what the connection, if any, was to where they were neighbors at some point, or at least they lived in the same vicinity of each other. It struck me as very random. And what's even worse about this is that in his plea deal, which he took to avoid the death penalty, is that he didn't have to disclose why he did it. So the only person you talked about, Ghislaine holding the key, in that instance, he holds the key and he'll hold it until the day he dies. And I think if you're a family member, that's heartbreaking because to lose someone that way is horrible enough, but to not even know why and to have that constant question hanging in your head, that's a death sentence in and of itself.
Well, yes and no. I think that number one, I mean, who knows if this guy is actually believable? Who knows if he would actually tell the truth? That's number one. Number two, what answer is he going to give these families that would make them feel better? I don't think any type of
Yeah.
answer. I think if anything, it might make them feel worse because they would sort of realize how senseless it was. And
Yeah.
I think my theory behind why he did what he did or his motive or what he was, going for. I do think his target was Maddie Mogan. I think that he went to the restaurant that she worked at. He was a vegan. They had vegan food there. He went to Washington State, which, was fairly close by. So driving distance to Idaho. And I think that when he went to the house that night, I don't think he was expecting Kaylee Gonzalez to be in bed with Maddie. So I think that through his plan, I think that he went to grape and murder Maddie, and Kaylee was there, and he was angry. And Kaylee, they kind of said Kaylee fought extremely hard. She had more damage done to her body than others, and I think that's because of the way she fought, and possibly because he was just so angry. But Xana Kernodle, she wasn't sleeping. I mean, she was awake. She was on TikTok, I think at 4 a.m. She had a DoorDash delivery come at like 4:12. They put the murders between 4:20 and 4:50, I believe. And I mean, I'll just say it. The toxicology reports haven't come out yet, but come on, Mike, these kids were most likely wasted. And I'm not saying that in any way to shame them. Not
Right.
at all.
No.
This is the University of Idaho. This is what kids do on the weekends. They were having fun. They were being college kids. Ethan Chapin, he had no defensive wounds. Okay, none. That means this poor kid was just passed out. He was just passed out. So I don't, I think that Brian Koberger truly, he is or he was trying to be a serial killer. And I think that if he wasn't stopped, he would have kept going. And I think that also you've got the two living roommates, Bethany and Dylan. And I personally think that he did not kill Dylan because he was exhausted. I think that, she testified or she told police that he walked right by her. Right by her. She saw his bushy eyebrows and he walked out the door. And yeah, I think he was just exhausted at that point. But that case makes me so sick to my stomach. I mean, so many things about that case. And Brian Koberger, I cannot stomach. Ugh.
And what's weird is something, obviously, if you're going to do something like that, something's wrong with you mentally, is when he was entering his guilty plea, which was live streamed, I believe CNN had it in real time. He's just very calm. It's almost like he was describing stealing a Hershey bar from a candy store as opposed to murdering 4 people. It was very eerie and creepy to watch that. Didn't he take a selfie shortly after that?
After the murders, yeah, there was like this gross selfie where he's smirking with a thumbs up. I mean, he is a sociopath, truly.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just gross. And the victim impact statement by Kaylee Gonsalvez's sister, Olivia, she actually worked with Dr. Ann Burgess, who's like this renowned forensic psychologist, criminologist. And Ann Burgess really worked with her, I think, from what I've read, to get into his brain to try to mess with him. And I think she did. You had these subtle smirks or these movements he was kind of doing while she was telling him what a loser he was, how he was a hypochondriac and no one cared about him. And I think honestly, she was getting to him, because there's not many ways you can get to guys like this,
And she did. And she
Yeah.
absolutely did. She just as she should have.
Mhm.
So moving ahead, again, you have found your niche as we talked about earlier. Your space and entertainment is only going to grow from here, especially with true crime. True crime, unfortunately, and this is not said in a good way, we're not happy to see these things happen, but true crime is never going to go out of style. I mean, there's always going to be a niche for that. So there's always going to be
Yeah.
coverage as a result of it. So where career wise, especially now as a mom, as we talked about earlier, and you're juggling it as best you can, what are your goals? Where do you want to expand to? And what are some of the things, short term and long term, besides what you mentioned earlier about potentially writing a book, that you'd like
Yeah.
to accomplish within the next few years?
Yeah, definitely, the book. I would love that. I do want to continue to cover crime in just, a sensitive manner, I guess, because sometimes I just put myself in the position of some of these families. Would I want someone to jump on, a podcast or a YouTube and start talking about my family, my situation, my tragedy, in a certain way, or I guess so quickly after it happened. So I'm constantly always just trying to put myself in their shoes, and just trying to be a better human about covering this stuff, because again, it really it crosses that line, right? You don't want to turn somebody's misfortune into entertainment, and I think that's so important to just remind everybody, and including myself. So yeah, I hope to cover more of these cases again in a sensitive way. One day it will be great to have my own series on TV, on a platform or something. I always think about that. And maybe just continuing to cover these criminal cases, the trials, I guess I should say. I really enjoy covering the trials as well. So I like doing all of it, and I would just love to see my audience grow and appreciate sort of the work that I'm putting in and the care that I'm putting in, as well.
Oh, I think it will. I think it will. Again, not only because of the niche aspect of it, but just because, again, we talked about earlier, if someone's not passionate about something, you could see right through it. If there's passion involved, it'll always go a long way, because passion's contagious. And I know that sounds very hokey to say, but it's true. It is true. If the audience senses it and they're equally passionate about it, it's only going to be a recipe for success, no matter what it is that you're doing in the media landscape. I will ask you, besides cases, I mean, Diddy was different. There was no homicides involved there. Epstein, sort of the same thing. Koberger, obviously there were, but besides that, other facets of crime like corruption. New York City recently had a major scandal involving that. Are there other aspects that you routinely cover or would like to cover should they arise? Or is there a certain niche within the crime space that really
No,
suits you
I
specifically?
mean, I typically cover crime and scandals. I was just attending the crypto kidnapping case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a crazy one. I mean, some of these cases, it's just like you cannot make this up. It's wild. And it's funny. You can read an article in the New York Post, you can read a blurb about whatever happened during the hearing. But for me, it's like I want to be there, because I will read the article and I'm like, ooh, I don't think they really captured the essence of what the heck is going on here. And also, I think it's so important to say both sides of these cases, of these crimes. And if you're just reading about this crypto kidnapping case, I mean, the Post, for example, they're doing their job. They want to make it sensational. So they're talking about how these guys allegedly tortured this Italian businessman and this and that. But then you've got the defense coming in, making a lot of good points here. And I'm not saying these guys are innocent. I'm just saying a lot of the time, publications won't point out everything the defense is saying because it kind of deters the sensational aspect of their story, which is why people click on it. So, yeah, I like to just go in to any of these criminal cases and just make sure that I am dictating both sides so you can decide for yourself.
It goes back
That
to
didn't really
something.
answer your question. Sorry. I just kind of went on a tangent.
No, that's fine because it goes back to something John Miller told me on my 100th episode a number of years ago, former NYPD deputy commissioner, currently at CNN, where he said back when he was working at Fox 5, one of his earliest journalism jobs, there used to be a sign above the newsroom saying, and it was ironically both sides entering and leaving the newsroom. There's two sides to every story. Which one did you get?
Yep.
And I never forgot that because it's true. Sometimes, listen, and there's certain slants to certain outlets. We don't have to get into it here, but kind of the perspective. I think it goes back to the core element of reporting. Let the viewer decide. I don't think, and I think that gets lost, unfortunately, in journalism nowadays. Certain journalists are trying to decide for you one way or the other. Give me what happened in its pure, unadulterated form, and let me, as a viewer, come to my own conclusion. And I think as long as the reporter stays true to that, well, they're never going to go wrong.
Yeah, and do not don't get me wrong. I definitely started off, I guess, with a perspective of bias on certain cases when I
Sure,
first
it's natural.
this. Yeah, and I definitely have backpedaled from there where if someone asks my opinion, on again certain cases, I'll give it to a degree. But I think that, yeah, my first true crime, my first case ever, it was this case out of Tennessee, the Grant Solomon case. I did a whole podcast on that. And I'm proud of my work later in the podcast, but I would say the first like 10 to 15 episodes, I'm so cringy. I am so pushing my narrative. I can't even listen. It's awful. So yeah, everyone has to start somewhere, and obviously I'm still learning, but yes, you're right. And that's how I feel now. Both sides, very important. If someone asks my opinion, I'll give it, but if I'm going to report for everybody, I'm not going to generally give an opinion.
I know I've led the same life as so many others in this position because as you're saying that, I mean, I'm 25 now. I started this when I was 17, 18 years old. And I'll look back sometimes and listen to interviews I did when I was, and producer Victor and I were talking about this the other day, 17, 18. I'm like, ugh, I have to hit pause. I'm like, I can't. I'm like, why did I even think to ask that? That was stupid. I mispronounced his name.
You were 17. That's so not a big deal. Are you kidding? I'm talking about when I'm like 35. Okay. You are fine. You are fine. Believe me.
But then again, it's part of the growth to where now, I kind of have a feel for an interview, and I'm not even, again, I have an outline. You saw it. I emailed it to you before we came on together just so you could see what I was going to ask you. I'm not married to it. If there's something interesting that comes up that slightly deviates from it, but it's good for the audience, you go with that, and ultimately gaining a feel as you have. It comes with time. It comes with time and experience, and you've gained that. And again, it shows. So the last thing I'll ask you before we get into the rapid fire to conclude is I imagine now, and again, I don't mean to sound facetious, but it's true. You're a mom, you have kids. He's covering these stories. You must never want to let him out of the house. My mom's the same way. She'll watch these 2020s and these Datelines. Again, me as a grown man, she'll still text me, make sure, where are you right now? What's going on? Which I appreciate, but it's like, I imagine now having younger kids, man, it changes your outlook after covering these cases, understandably.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think that it's actually helped a bit. I think that my kids, I've learned how to talk to them in a way that doesn't scare them. I mean, they're almost 7 and 9, but we've got the tiles, the Life 360, or they're basically essentially air tags. So we've got those, and my kids know the purpose of them. And we have something called a family password that we use where if they're encountered by anybody that says, your mom told me to pick you up, your dad told me to pick you up, whatever, I say, no, you ask them the family password. And if they don't know it, yeah, I mean, and essentially just all these things, like adults should not be interested in children. They should not be interested in you at all. They should not ask you for help. My kids they go to, camp. Nobody should, when you're changing in your bathing suit, nobody should see you naked. Nobody should have a cell phone around you. And I think that I just sort of learned to give them these warnings without being scary. My kids will tell you, if you ever see them, they'll say the only time it's okay to bite someone is if someone you don't want is pulling your hand out of a park or trying to get you to go somewhere. I say, you just bite down and they'll tell you, and they'll talk about it in a way that is again, not super daunting. I just think it's nice to have your kids be aware, not have them live in Candyland, but also don't scare them, because you don't want to, be having them wake you up in the middle of the night with nightmares about stranger danger either. So,
Oh, of course, and it's a balancing act, and I love that. That is true. Good on you for teaching them that about the biting when necessary. I felt bad for laughing, but there was when you were on the Koberger stream recently, and your 6-year-old jump scared you.
oh my gosh, that was insane. And I was at my parents' house, and so I was in my old room and I put my kids to sleep. They have like a finished basement. So I literally had put my kids to sleep an hour before in the basement. So I'm like 2 floors up. We're talking about Koberger and it's quiet. You can hear a pin drop. I'm telling you, the whole house was pitch black. Because at this point, it's like 10:30 at night. My parents are asleep. I don't even hear this kid. He tiptoes, whatever. He open. I had the door shut. So it's funny. I thought I heard something. So I just kind of went like that. And then I look over and he's staring at me like children of the corn. Just like, it was insane. I jumped so hard. I was like out of my mind. So yes, that was a moment. I was so embarrassed too. I was like, so
no, listen, I relate it to, because I'm like, as a son, I tell this to my mother all the time. If we're not taking years off your life, are we even sons? It's our job. So
totally.
It never ends. Like I said, I'm 25. Still do it. Still do it.
It's
so true. That brings us into the rapid fire. The hour has flown by. It's 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. You can say pass if you want. First, going back to your red carpet days, favorite moment on the red carpet.
I was interviewing, oh gosh. Well, basically I was interviewing George. I'm blanking on his name. Oh my gosh, Clooney? I feel so bad. What was that?
Clooney?
No, sorry. He was Seinfeld's longtime manager.
George. Jason Alexander.
No, George. Oh, this is the worst. This is so bad. He just passed away, but basically, I'll get it for you. What's that?
I'll get it for you. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll find it.
Yes. So, gosh, it's gonna kill me. But this was my favorite moment, like ever. And I clipped this into a couple different shorts, I think. But I'm talking to this guy George, and I feel horrible. He was part of this documentary that was airing on HBO about him growing up in the Bronx. And again, he's Seinfeld's longtime manager, and I'm interviewing
George
him.
Shapiro.
Yes, thank you, George Shapiro. He's the cutest man ever. He was. And all of a sudden, Jerry Seinfeld, just walks up to us and interrupts the interview. And I was just like, this is amazing, because he was there. I just never thought I was going to get to speak with him. But it was such a great moment. And I think that there's me kind of looking into the camera like that. Like I couldn't even hold my excitement. So that was, my favorite moment that I just butchered telling you. But yeah.
Nah, it's fine. Don't worry. As you told me, I'm fine. You're fine. Believe me. We've had some crazier moments on this program. We've talked about cases that have hit you hard, but listen, I'm sure there's some uplifting stories you've been able to cover too. So what's a case that impacted you in a positive way? Or a story that impacted you in a positive way, rather.
In a positive way? Well, I think that the first case I had mentioned, the Grant Solomon case, I don't necessarily know if that impacted me in a positive way, but it gave me a passion, I think, for helping maybe families that needed help in kind of navigating their situation. I learned a lot, and I'm still learning. That case is not done. So I would say the Grant Solomon case has just sort of been a case that just has really opened my eyes to a lot of things, and sort of just kind of pushed me as a journalist and as a reporter. And I'm grateful for the relationships that I made with the family and everything that I am learning and still learning about that case.
Third question, rapid fire. As far as your podcast goes, one guest that surprised you in a good way.
Oh gosh. One guest that surprised me in a good way. I don't know. I recently just spoke to Mark Garagos and I love him. I mean, I know that he's defended some bad people like Scott Peterson, but he's just so smart, so full of knowledge, and just a nice guy, really nice guy. So I really enjoyed talking to him.
There you go. Fourth, dream interview, past or present, dead or alive.
Ooh, that's a good one. Oh my gosh. Oh no, no, no. I mean, I would love to interview I don't know. I feel like this is going to sound horrible because I think that I would like to interview someone like a Brian Koberger to get answers. I would also like to interview someone like Ghislaine to get answers. But uh somebody fun. I love Wendy Williams. I think she's amazing and I would love to interview her one day, collab with her because man, I think she is just an unmatched talent. She is just puts herself out there. She's so funny and she's just, her opinions are hilarious and I feel really bad about what's happening to her right now. So hopefully she's going to go to court, probably have a jury trial next year and we'll get past all of this conservator guardianship stuff.
Yeah, same thing with the Britney Spears situation. So yeah, I mean, she was walking around recently in the city, so she looks like she's doing better. She was smiling. She seemed like she was in good spirits. So I hope, because I know she's had some health problems recently as well. So I send her my very best. Again, I never watched her show, but it's impossible to not know who Wendy Williams is. Seeing the clips of her over the years on social media, she is one of a kind. That's for sure.
She is.
That brings us to the final question of the rapid fire. Best piece of advice that you've gotten in the business that you'd like to share with anybody trying to get into the business?
I would just say be true to yourself, trust your gut, that whole thing. Usually people have something inside them that will give them a feeling of if they should go down a certain path or not. So I would say trust it and just always be true to yourself. Don't give in to what could be perceived as something that you should do but you really know that you shouldn't. I would just say that's my advice.
All right, well done. Of course, stick around. We'll talk off air. For those of you that will listen to this, you'll see this. Of course, this will be airing next Wednesday on August 13th. But before we go, I always have guests or the guest of honor rather give shout outs to anyone or anything if they'd like to. So the floor is yours. If you have any shout outs, go right ahead.
Well, you can follow my YouTube at Pop Crime TV. You can follow me on X at Conlin_Lauren, Instagram, Lauren Emily Conlin, TikTok, Lauren Conlin 4. Yeah, you can just find me and I would love for you to listen, watch, whatever.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so for those of you listening to this, of course, next Wednesday, you'll have previously heard NYPD Lieutenant John Vicari, who also has gone into podcasting post-retirement from the New York City Police Department. And after this interview airs coming up on Friday, it'll be Kim Woodward, who was a CIA intelligence analyst during the 90s and early aughts, of course, when much of the war on terror was starting to take shape. So I'll talk to her about that. So some really exciting shows on tap for the remainder of August. And we're booking into September as well. So stay tuned for what we've got cooked up. Now, for those of you listening on the audio side, from her 1998 self-titled debut album on this outro song, Tamia, it's Tamia coming your way with So Into You, a song I love blasting shamelessly in my car during this time of year. In the meantime, on behalf of producer Victor and Lauren Conlin of Pop Crime TV, I'm Mike Colón, and we will see you next time. Take care, everyone.